Hi and welcome to today's recap. It's round 8 of the candidates and it truly is a historic day. An absolutely epic fights are happening. Game between Hikaru and Fabiana Caruana was on our menu, but indeed what a fight it was. Lots of kibitzing, lots of viewers and lots of excitement there. Many plot twists and truly an epic battle between the two American leaders. The actual leader, Jan Nepomniachtchi, had white pieces against Ding Liren. I predicted the draw. I thought yesterday that Jan should, or not should, I would expect him to still try it with the white pieces, but he perhaps wisely decided to save energy and left the stage, and we didn't miss him much today, as truly the other players have compensated. Also, the game between Firouzja and Radjabov was an incredible fight all the way to the end. I was watching the final moments with the time scramble. They were about to lose on time a few times. It was really incredible. And the game between Rapport and Duda also, as expected, a showdown between two desperate guys producing brilliant chess. Looking forward to show you everything. Let's jump straight into it right now. The game that finished first was the game between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren. Jan decided not to fight in this game, and that is a reasonable strategy. He had a half point more than Fabiana Caruana. He wanted to see what's going to happen to Fabi with his in his black game against Hikaru today, and as we will see, maybe he took a right call. After e4, e5, knight 3, knight c6, knight 3, f6, d4, he played this known variation where you trade a lot of pieces, and very often you keep trading stuff. And as you see, he traded even on f6, and then you trade a knight for the bishop, you get opposite color bishops, and this is kind of a well-known way to end the game in a draw when both players don't mind it. It's hard for black to resist that. You have to take some enormous risks and really hard to unbalance this variation. So Ding decided not to resist, and game was quickly drawn, and all attention was shifted to the game of the day that we're not going to look at. Game between Fabi and Hikaru. Started off with 1e4, and Fabiana played the open Spanish that he played a lot in his career, and this new trendy variation. I'm saying new, I should correct myself. I first saw this line a long time ago as I was reading some chess book as a kid, and this knight takes f2 sacrifice with f6, it was already there in that book. So it's truly an ancient line that's completely revived itself recently. Black's given up a knight and bishop for a rook and a pawn. Material balance is kind of equal, but frankly on the white side, I believe. These kind of things, you see a lot of amateurs, they do these kind of things. They go like bishop c5, and then they go knight g5, and they take on f7. I see that happen all the time in amateur games, and I faced it myself as a kid by other kids who didn't have a coach as good as mine. This is not good for the side that gives up two light pieces. But in this particular case, it's a little different because white is struggling with development. The king is here on the open file, and black is very quick. With his development, he wants to take, maybe open the file, bring the rook in, pin the knight with the bishop, start dynamic play very fast. And that indeed is the case after ef, queen f6, which is the old main line. But the new trend is knight f1. You just give up the pawn for the development. You move the knight over, open the bishop, and want to really develop this knight here. And after f1, you just move the king to g1, move out of the harm's way. And here, really, there are many ways to play. Fabiana picks one of them, offering trade of bishop. White keeps the bishops. When you have the bishop pair, you often don't want to trade your bishop, because when you have two bishops, they can control the entire board. So you want to preserve both of them. Moving over for the rook to join the game here or here. And knight b7, taking control of the square, intending to push this pawn mass forward. And this is really what the position revolves around. You want to push these pawns forward. You want to do that carefully. You don't want to get them blocked. For example, if you too early push d4, and right now it's not even possible, but in theory later on, and you get white to somehow blockade on the e4 square, then your two connected passed pawns, basically these two d and e pawns, they lose their mobility. Likewise, if you push e pawn instead, and then you get the move like before, blocking the c pawn, then you cannot connect to the d pawn, and then you get them blocked. So you have to push these pawns very carefully. But starting with c5 is very good. You keep the pawns fluid, and that's important. Rook e1, c5. Now everybody was confused during the live game. What happened? Why knight g3, why not bishop g5? Because after rook d8, there is a beautiful tactic: takes, bishop f4, and white wins. white won a pawn and he will regain the rook and everything's great. But Hikaru realized that Fabio's prep only begins here. Line goes c4, takes, and cb. Bishop goes back, I believe, and then you take and get the bishop here, trap this rook, and the position is extremely unclear. Computer first likes white, but then changes its mind, saying that it's maybe playable for black. And I'm sure Fabio enjoyed himself in this position. And Hikaru decided not to go into this, just develop his knight. And now Fabio started going wrong somewhere. He could maybe drop the bishop back. He went here, and after this move, he had to decide, does he push c-pawn or e-pawn? Both moves support the bishop, both moves attack a piece. The question is how not to get your pawns blocked. If you push c4, the nice thing is you might bring the knight into the game, but if you ever push e4, you're never gonna be able to push your pawns forward anymore. So c4, a very risky decision. Instead, e4 would allow for black to later push d4. Of course, I realized Fabio didn't like the knight on b7, he didn't like the knights jumping in, but it seems that after queen e5 here, followed by king h8 intending d4, white would have quite some issues to solve, and black would have the counterplay he wants. c4 was a big mistake. Now Fabio probably hoped for bishop c2, which is very natural, trading off this bishop that looks strong but isn't. If you trade the bishop, then you take, the knight comes in to an active square. If you trade, then you got rid of some bishops and you still have potential to push the pawn, like for example king h1 d4. Probably Fabio was thinking something along these lines, but Hikaru rightly judged this bishop on d3. It looks very active. It is very disturbing, especially the fact that black controls the f-file. It's very disturbing. But Hikaru understood he can play around that f-file. He can play around that bishop, and he called this bishop a very dumb piece after the game, and rightly so. Deep understanding by Hikaru. He said after the game that he spent 2 hours analyzing this opening yesterday, and it seems that in these 2 hours, like Alpha 0 in 4, he just unlocked this position and unlocked some meta understanding of it. Truly a great show of understanding here by Hikaru begins. First bishop f2, okay, attacking the pawn, provoking e4, so far so good, but rook df7. The rooks are doubled, you cannot move the knight, pawn is protected indirectly. What you gonna do? e4 is also a threat. Now divine understanding, knight to h1. Never ever do that. Never put your knight in the corner of the board. But here it's a very special case. Only Hikaru and some other big streamers are allowed to do it. You are not allowed to do that. But here the bishop is protected and the pawn is hanging, and you have to push e4. But now you go knight d4, you block these pawns forever, and truly the nightmare scenario for black has come. The pawn majority is completely neutralized. The only thing he can cherish is the fact that the knight on h1 is a horrible piece, but sooner or later, if it ever gets back into the game, black will be busted, because he's got now a rook against 2 pieces and his 2 pawns are worthless. And after queen g6, Hikaru comes up with a great way to untangle. He goes for h4, a beautiful, beautiful move. He wants to chase the queen away, perhaps over a trade, and he starts unfolding his entire set of pieces. He goes h5, kicks the queen away, develops the bishop, then improves the position of the queen. Then eventually, as he wins the pawn, he's able to redeploy the knight back into the game, and slowly but surely he is going to convert this position. Here was a moment where he could win probably quite trivially with bishop e8, just collect the pawn, not rush. If rook f5, bishop e3, the rook will be trapped. But he decided to go for the queen side. But Fabiano came up with an epic idea, h3. If knight h3, there is rook f1. If gh, there is rook f3, all kinds of counterplay. And here was an important moment for Hikaru. He missed this h3, I'm quite sure, but he recomposed himself and found a very accurate way. Rook a2, protect the knight. h2 now can be taken, hg, and now guard from rook f3, bishop d1. A beautiful display of harmony by Hikaru. That was the first time he recomposed himself and found the move that he needed to find. Now he's again back in complete control, improving his pieces further. Excellent, reaching an absolute domination here. There are multiple ways to win. He can trade off this rook, a very efficient way to win like that, and then bring the bishop here, collect the a pawn and just queen it. He could also bring the rook here, create the threat of this check here on a6, also completely winning. Of course, in a higher sense, not completely winning trivially, but a position that Hikaru should be able to convert without many difficulties. But he decided to go for material, knight d5, logical. You force the a rook to take, and you think how much issue can this e2 pawn create. So it's firmly blocked, but it seemed it was a problem that was quite difficult to deal with. Here Hikaru missed a very unusual win. He could have given back all the material he had, and this position suddenly is lost for black because the b pawn is simply queening, and there is no stopping it because the bishop is somehow misplaced here. This is not really easy to see because material is so limited that you might think that, okay, somehow the b pawn will be controlled. So Hikaru missed that. He thought, okay, why not just protect from queening? But Fabi managed to push Hikaru's king back, and now rook h1, rook f1 became extremely annoying. And here was a moment after king e3, rook e6 that Hikaru realized that things are not going his way anymore. It's not so simple anymore. There are issues to convert. And here he took another pause and came up with a brilliant regroup that won him the game. Despite the wind starting to blow in the other direction, Hikaru managed to recompose himself. And that's really a quality of a great streamer. Knight e3, rook h1 or rook f6, rook f1, and now knight g2. Knight is going for defense, and the idea is to go bishop f2 and then knight e1. The knights are the best blockaders. The knights and the bishop are going to create a wall around the e2 pawn, then the rook will start cashing in on the weaknesses. Truly a great concept, and Fabi was no longer able to put much resistance. It's possible to try a cheap trick with rook h1, bishop f2, bishop f5, intending checkmate, but after king f3, white wins quite trivially in the arising variations. So great accuracy by Hikaru here. When he was about to let things go, he grabbed control and showed who is the boss today. The rest of the game was very trivial. The knight is a great blockader. It can also activate itself without allowing e1 queen, and that happened, and then even activated itself on d4 because e1 is no longer possible with rook not being behind the pawn. So now after rook e5 and knight f3, everything is falling apart. At some point g pawn will fall, and e pawn can also easily fall at some point. So before seeing his entire position collapse, Fabi resigned. Truly great fight by both players and an incredible game that we will enjoy for years to come. But now let's see what happened in the other games, because we have got no time to lose. Another monumental battle between Richard Rapport and young Krzysztof Duda. Richard no longer wanted any theoretical fight, goes for this sideline with g3, but he still prepared it, and I can show you why here. This little move b3, I noticed that this move is a strange move, but he stops black from advancing the queen side with a4, stops him from grabbing space. So even in this little sideline, Richard still had some idea prepared. After castle, he just went for h3 and played it quite slow. Now, opening the f-file is quite risky because these pawns are doubled, but the strategy worked out eventually. Here, objectively speaking, black is doing quite well, and Duda, seeing that the bishop and the knight don't contribute to the attack, and the f-pawn is well protected, Duda decided to take charge with h5, g5, h4, very inventive solution, and knight h7. After queen g3, Duda, if he wanted, he could just take with the queen. Probably Richard would have to trade them, because if he doesn't, the rook lift will be a big problem. But Duda was more aggressive. He kept the queens on the board, and after h4 and h7, Richard came up with a great solution, bishop h3. The rook lift was really a serious issue, but Richard found bishop h3, takes, and now not just recapture because of the rook lift, but this intermezzo rook g1. It was such a strong move that somehow Duda completely collapsed. Instead, he should just go g6, and after takes, bring the knight to f6, king to g7, and rook to h8, and this defensive setup would give black a very fine position. Instead, he gave the knight instead of the bishop, and after hg, bishop c8, rook g2, he had to be very accurate here as clouds around the black king appear. He had to go for f6 right away. If g6, the king can escape to e7. The last chance he had was still here. In fact, he could have gone for f6, and if g6, funny enough, the king is still escaping because this traps the queen because of rook h8. So f6 had to be played. Duda tried to go for g6, and because he was afraid of g6, I guess, so he tried to go for g6 and then f5. Now gf would be a relief for black, as he would be able to block the pawn later with the king. But Richard pointed out very nicely with the move king g1 that he doesn't need to react. He has the h file, and yeah, this is very dangerous. Queen h1 is coming in with the decisive effect. Queen h3, sorry, queen h8. And before Richard just opened the position, knight e4. Yeah, knight e4 is just the showing of all his creative talent. Queen h5 was also going to checkmate, but knight e4 first is very beautiful. If takes, then queen h5. So a sweet revenge for Richard, who managed to come back after a horrible, tough loss yesterday against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and a tough event for Duda, who lost his second game. Now we are entering the stage where it becomes clear that Duda is going to be one of the players who are going to suffer in the event, because with the score that he has, it's really hard to keep the morale high, because all the players in this tournament, they want to fight for the first place. And the moment you lose these chances, the moment everybody realizes you are an outsider, then it's no longer fun. You don't know what you're doing there, and you want it to be over, but you still have to be there. And people that are excited to be there because they are in the lead, they are going to enjoy your misery. So top game for Duda. And finally, the longest game of the day, Alireza against Radjabov. The game was extremely maneuvering and slow. The structure from the Italian, where black doubles the e-pawns, it's such a leads to such slow play, because the structure is almost closed. Black has some kind of d5 push that he almost never does, not to weaken the pawns. White has some ideas of d4 but on b5, but he doesn't rush them either. It becomes a very slow game where everybody maneuvers endlessly, tries to improve the position very slightly, bit by bit, maybe trade a knight there, here or there, maybe a rook, maybe push d4. Even after d4 still, nobody has to react. So nothing was happening. I have to point out though that in this shuffling at one point, Raja missed a very beautiful shot. So here is a shot of the day that was missed. Knight hf4. Note this knight on g4 doesn't have squares. So if you take, I take, and if you move the rook, I will go h5. Knight is trapped, and this change in the position is to black's advantage. White king is very open, and after h5 here instead, if you take, white will take. He's got two knights for a rook, which is decent, but very strong is knight h4, king h3. You can take, but you can also play g5. That's a beautiful move. If h8g, you go knight g6, rook f3 and h5. Knight is still trapped. On h6 also it's going to be trapped. And if you go for simply moving the rook, now black has a very elegant solution. I'm curious if you can find it. It's truly difficult. That is to go rook e7, preparing queen e8, queen h5. Surprising geometry there. As the h pawn will fall, the king will be in a huge danger. And so black is actually having a huge advantage here. A huge miss by Radja there. While they were shuffling, he didn't notice this resource, because with rook e3, Alireza somehow left the knight without any squares, and nobody noticed that. So that was a big miss there. But otherwise, they kept shuffling, trading some stuff. Nothing was happening for a long time. They were going down on the clock. We reached the first time control, started going down on the clock again. Lots of moving around, some inaccuracies here or there, but all very minor. Raja was a little clumsy somewhere here. The way he was playing, but then he could bring the knight back to h5, which was really good. And now he went somehow here. He could have stayed on e7, not letting white to regroup, keeping knight hg3 always in reserve. But somehow Alireza was able to bring the rook back here, the knight here, and he could have at some point pushed maybe for g4. And here was another opportunity for Raja to change the position with knight e4, g4, and knight g5. There's lots of pins, but nothing can be captured. And here, this another pin, again, nothing can be captured. And if you take, then these pawns can be set in motion, and the king is a bit weak. So an opportunity for Raja once again was missed, and the game continued. And here, white maybe is better, but I saw the game, both players were on seconds, and it was very hard for white to make progress here. It's hard to push forward. You don't know what to push. You have to probably try to somehow penetrate somewhere here, trade maybe rooks or something like that. But as happened in the game, both players were shuffling with seconds on the clock, and it started looking as though Raja is going to maybe even win with king march here and pressure on the f-pawn. But Alireza found rook e1, defending the pawn. If king h4, rook h1 check, just in time, and he kept position together. Black could try rook d7 or rook a7, maybe d4 somewhere, maybe try to give a check here. but Radja was already content with the draw because he was on the defensive for a large part of the game. Long fight, finally a draw, another frustrating result for Alireza, who still cannot find a way to win a game in the event where he came with so much motivation and so much hopes, but he will still have time. He's a very young, very promising player. That brings us to the end of this recap. Of course, the game of the day between Hikaru and Fabiano is analyzed in even greater detail in my Chessable course, and there you can also find the puzzles and all the perks that Chessable has for you to offer. So check out all the links that they provide you with, and let's look at what tomorrow will bring us. Tomorrow, a hugely important day once again. Caruana against Nepomniachtchi, an important battle. Even if Fabi had made a draw today, he would still be chasing. So in that sense, not much has changed from a standing point of view. Fabi has to win if he wants to grab that lead from Jan. But I think the loss today has a serious impact on Fabi's general mood. He was playing a good tournament, a really good tournament for his standards, for any standards. And if not for the loss of today of the round 8, really not much would shake his confidence, and he would be eager to play another great game tomorrow. He still will be going all out against Jan with the white pieces in the 9th round. He is fully motivated, he's focused, he'll prepare very hard. He'll pretend that everything is fine. But I know that as a chess player, the processes that you go through while you're playing the game are also subconscious and subtle. And these kind of disturbances in your mind, the losses and everything, and all the misery that the loss brings with itself, yeah, they are problematic. So I am not as optimistic for Fabi as I would be had he played well today, but we will see. He is truly a great player, and if anyone is able to play a great game after a game like today, which was so painful, it is Fabiano. So I'm really eager to see that. And even if Fabi doesn't manage to win, it's still going to be an exciting event, because the race for the 2nd place also is very important. With all the flirtations of Magnus Carlsen, who says he might not play the World Championship match, 2nd place might become really important. And now Hikaru joined that fight. He plays Radjabov tomorrow with black. Radjabov is playing very solid in this event, so I don't expect Hikaru to get too many chances, but if he gets any chance, he will try to pounce. Firouzja Rapport is a game between two exciting great players, but both of them not likely fighting for any top spots, although Rapport just won and back to 50%. Perhaps if Rapport gets a few wins together, he will start getting ambitious. And Dinglerian against Duda, I do think it's time for Dinglerian to win a game. I think he has already come to terms with this tournament, with the fact that it is not going to be his event. And this is an important realization, an important moment in the tournament. The moment you give up, you actually give up the chase, you have a sort of a revelation. And sometimes, I know from myself and from other players as well, you start playing really well. The moment you think that it's all over and you have no chance, suddenly you relax. You just play chess, you just enjoy the game. He said in his interview today, he just wants to enjoy. The moment you just enjoy and do your thing, suddenly things can click, and Ding might win a game, and it is possible that he collects a bunch of wins, puts a bunch of wins together, though it is not realistic to expect Ding to have any shot at the tournament victory with 1 loss and no wins. Still, it's going to be an exciting game, and I'm looking forward to that. But of course, all eyes on Fabi against Nepo. Thank you for watching, and see you in the round 9 recap tomorrow. Bye-bye. And of course, they keep reminding me to remind you that you should go pro on Chessable, but much more importantly, subscribe to my channel. That will truly make me happy. I don't know how many people subscribe to pro on Chessable, and I don't really care, but my subscribers on YouTube are accessible to everyone and everybody can see it, and I want to be very big on YouTube. It will make me very happy. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.